By the time the armies faced each other along the Gazala line, the Desert War had become a contest between commanders as much as machines. Tanks, minefields, boxes, and supply columns mattered enormously, but they had to be directed by men trying to make decisions across distances that swallowed certainty. On the British side stood General Neil Ritchie, commander of the Eighth Army, and General Claude Auchinleck, the commander-in-chief in the Middle East, responsible for the broader direction of the campaign from Cairo. On the Axis side stood Erwin Rommel, leading the German and Italian Panzer Army Africa with a style built around speed, personal presence, and calculated risk. Gazala would test not only whose tanks could move and whose guns could kill, but whose command system could understand the battle quickly enough to shape it. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. Ritchie had been given command of the Eighth Army during Operation Crusader, and he inherited a force still learning how to fight a modern mobile battle in the desert. He was not a foolish officer, and he was not commanding cowards or amateurs. His army contained experienced formations, improving equipment, and commanders who had already endured hard fighting against Rommel. But Ritchie's position was difficult because the Eighth Army was expected to defend ground, protect Tobruk, preserve its armored strength, and prepare for future offensive action. Those demands did not always fit neatly together, and the Gazala system required a commander able to coordinate fixed defenses and mobile reserves under conditions of great uncertainty. Auchinleck's role was different, but deeply connected. As Commander-in-Chief, Middle East, he had to think beyond the immediate line at Gazala. Egypt, the Suez Canal, Malta, the Mediterranean supply war, and British imperial communications all formed part of his wider responsibility. He also had to deal with political pressure from London, where the Desert War carried symbolic weight far beyond the sand and dust of Libya. Tobruk had become a name known across the British Empire, and losing it again would be more than a local setback. Auchinleck, therefore, had to balance caution, confidence, and expectation, while watching an army commanded by someone else prepare to meet Rommel's next move. That division between theater command and army command was not unusual, but at Gazala it created a serious problem. Auchinleck could issue broad direction, judge strategy, and intervene when necessary, yet the immediate battle belonged to Ritchie. Ritchie had to interpret guidance, manage subordinate corps and divisions, and respond to developments faster than the chain of command could always process them. In a slower campaign, such separation might be manageable. In the desert, where armored columns could shift the center of gravity in hours, it could be dangerous. The British command system had to decide whether it was directing a deliberate defense, preparing an offensive, or reacting to a sudden operational crisis, and those answers were not always clear at the same moment. Rommel's command style seemed, on the surface, to offer the opposite model. He often positioned himself close to the action, moved forward aggressively, and made decisions with remarkable speed. His presence near the front could energize his troops and allow him to exploit opportunities before they disappeared. He had a talent for sensing when an opponent was off balance and for turning a limited opening into a much larger crisis. That personal command style helped create the legend of the Desert Fox, but it was not magic. Rommel's boldness worked best when the enemy command system hesitated, when Axis formations could maintain enough fuel and ammunition, and when risk did not outrun logistics. The danger of Rommel's method was that it could blur the line between audacity and overextension. A commander who drove forward to seize the initiative might also outrun his information, his supply columns, and his ability to control every part of the battle. Rommel's subordinates, including German and Italian formation commanders, often had to operate inside a plan that could change rapidly as he reacted to events. This gave the Axis army flexibility, but it also created dependence on Rommel's personal judgment. When his instincts were right, the results could be dramatic. When his army became short of fuel, trapped by minefields, or pressed from several sides, his own boldness could place the entire force in danger. The British did not lack bravery or material strength, but they struggled to create the same unity of battlefield action. Their command arrangements often produced delays between sighting an opportunity and striking it with enough force. Armored brigades might be sent forward in separate actions rather than concentrated for a decisive blow. Infantry boxes might hold firm while mobile formations maneuvered elsewhere, leaving the two parts of the system connected in theory but separated in practice. Artillery, anti-tank guns, reconnaissance, and air support all mattered, but their effect depended on timing. At Gazala, the great British challenge was not simply to have the right tools, but to bring them together at the right place before Rommel changed the problem. Auchinleck understood many of these issues, and he had a clearer grasp of the campaign's strategic danger than later simplifications sometimes allow. He knew that Rommel was dangerous, that the British army still had weaknesses in mobile operations, and that the defense of Egypt mattered more than any single forward position. But understanding the problem did not automatically solve the problem of command. From Cairo, he could not personally direct every brigade, every minefield gap, or every armored counterstroke. If he intervened too much, he risked confusing the authority of the army commander. If he intervened too little, he risked watching the battle slip away before higher command fully grasped its shape. Ritchie's burden was therefore immediate and unforgiving. He had to manage a defensive line that was not a line in the traditional sense, but a system of boxes, minefields, routes, reserves, and mobile formations spread across an enormous area. He had to judge whether Rommel's movements were a feint, a breakthrough attempt, a flanking maneuver, or a temporary risk that could be punished. He had to keep enough armor ready to counterattack without scattering it prematurely. He also had to protect the morale and confidence of an army that had seen Rommel recover from apparent defeat before. In that environment, uncertainty was not a passing inconvenience. It was the atmosphere in which every decision had to be made. The difference between the commanders can be overstated if the story becomes a simple tale of bold Rommel against timid British generals. That is too easy and not quite fair. Rommel made mistakes, took severe risks, and depended heavily on supply arrangements that were often fragile. British commanders had real constraints, including long fronts, political expectations, mixed formations, complicated logistics, and a defensive concept that required unusually precise execution. The more useful lesson is that command style must fit the battle being fought. Rommel's style was well suited to creating a crisis. The British system was supposed to manage a crisis, but at Gazala, it would have to prove that it could do so under pressure. Communications formed the hidden bridge between command intent and battlefield reality. Wireless sets, signal discipline, map references, liaison officers, and reports from forward units all shaped what commanders believed was happening. In desert warfare, dust, distance, and movement could make information old before it reached the people who needed it. A report of enemy tanks in one place might be accurate when sent and misleading by the time it was received. A commander could make a rational decision based on a picture that no longer existed. This problem affected both sides, but it was especially dangerous for a defensive system that depended on coordinating separated strongpoints and mobile reserves. The coming battle would reveal how different levels of command responded to surprise. Rommel planned to strike in a way that made the Gazala line less a barrier than a puzzle to be turned from the side. Ritchie's army would have to identify the main threat, shift armor, protect the boxes, and decide when to counterattack. Auchinleck would have to judge from above whether the battle was a local crisis, a manageable defensive fight, or a campaign-level emergency. None of those judgments would be easy because the early stages of a desert battle often produced contradictory signs. An enemy could look trapped and dangerous at the same time, vulnerable and victorious in the same day. This command triangle matters because armored warfare is often misunderstood as a contest decided mainly by machines. At Gazala, the machines were essential, but the decisive question was how men used them inside a moving battle. Tanks had to be concentrated, infantry had to hold, anti-tank guns had to be positioned, engineers had to open or close routes, and supply columns had to keep the entire structure alive. That required command systems that could think faster than the battlefield changed. Rommel, Ritchie, and Auchinleck represented three different relationships to that problem. The forward gambler, the army commander trying to control a sprawling defense, and the theater commander trying to protect the larger war. The tragedy of Gazala would be that British strength did not translate smoothly into operational control. The Eighth Army had numbers, equipment, fortified positions, and brave troops, but command friction turned those advantages into something less decisive than they appeared. Rommel had fewer resources in many respects, but he possessed a gift for forcing his opponents to solve several problems at once. That is why the campaign cannot be explained by courage alone, or by tank models alone, or by one commander's reputation alone. Gazala became a command battle because every tactical event demanded interpretation, and every interpretation demanded action. When the offensive began, the side that understood the battle's shape first would gain more than ground. It would gain the initiative, and in the desert, initiative could be as powerful as armor itself.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.